it's Dan again. Today we're going to be talking about a book that I've read called D-Day with Screaming Eagles, and it's by George Koskimaki, if I pronounce that correctly. And I'm giving the book review here at the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi River here in Illinois, which is the start place of the Lewis and Clark expedition. So, you know, it's a beautiful morning. I've been out bike riding, and I thought I would share some of these views with the audience today. But let's talk about the book a little bit. This is a very interesting book. It's not so much as a history as it is a chronicle of individual experiences during D-Day, particularly with the Screaming Eagles. And what the author did is he took stories from maybe 100 people, and he blended those into the events on the strategic level of the Battle of D-Day. And so what you get at the end of the day is a really personal look at what happened to the individual fighting soldier on D-Day and how that meshed into the larger picture of the invasion plans. It's an amazing testament to what that generation did for our generation, because you know what they did is they created this security bubble that allows me, 2 generations at least after them, to come out and enjoy a beautiful day at a national park by these lovely rivers, and it was through their sacrifice that I get this opportunity. So it's a humbling experience to read what these folks did for us, and you know, my best wishes and appreciation to them and their families, even though many of them are not with us nowadays. I would like to talk, instead of going through individual stories, I'd like to talk a little bit about my general impressions and things that struck me as interesting. And one of the things that struck me as most interesting is maybe 2 years ago I read a book called On Combat, and I'll put a picture of it at the end of the video. I can't remember the colonel that wrote it, but he talks a lot about what happens to people physiologically when they're in a combat or high-stress situation. And that book gave me a different and more appreciative reading of these individual experiences. And one of the ways that that really manifested itself is that a lot of the soldiers, when they talk about D-Day, they say that they were so tired, they couldn't believe they were so tired, and when they finally hit the ground, that they'd fall into a ditch and fall asleep for 8 hours. And this is one of those physiological effects of high stress that is discussed in On Combat and On Killing by that same author. Again, I'll put his name at the end. And so seeing that illustrated in this book and in these soldier stories made me really appreciate the amount of stress that they were going through and how that impacted the way that they viewed their small part of the battle. The other thing that I like about this book is that the author went through great lengths of providing overlapping stories where they overlap. So if one person told a story, say for example, of setting up a medical aid station, he would go and he'd find 2 or 3 other people that had a slightly different view of that particular instance, and he would weave that into the story so that not only are you seeing it through the eyes of the primary person talking about it, but you get in these secondary and tertiary views of that same event, which gives you a much more holistic look at it, and it makes you appreciate what's going on more often. I will just talk about one interesting story. It was with a doctor, and he was setting up an aid station, and they were captured by the Germans, and 2 German paratroopers, I believe, grabbed him out of, I think it was a barn that they were in, and walked him up the street, and they were going to shoot him. That was his impression. But just before they shot him, just for no particular reason, because he was a doctor, he was helping Germans and Allies alike, another German soldier walked by and said hello to him in English and had a chat with him about his time as a German in New Orleans and how he wished he could get back to New Orleans when the war was over. And for me, that story tied in how small the world has gotten and how tragic things can actually get when people go off and fight for their home countries, because they are literally leaving friends behind and fighting friend against friend in this type of conflict. So that was a striking story for me for two reasons, and one was just the absolute randomness of selecting this doctor out to shoot him for no particular reason, to the absolute randomness of meeting some guy who'd spent a couple of years in New Orleans, who is now fighting in the Nazi armies, and who inadvertently saved this doctor's life because he wanted to chat with an American. These sort of absurd stories are very difficult to make up. So I do recommend this book highly, although I recommend it after you've read another book that gives you an overarching picture of D-Day, because you're going to need that context to truly appreciate the stories of the soldiers that actually fought the battle, particularly with the Screaming Eagles, as they were the first ones on the ground ahead of the invasion troops on the beaches. So again, and what I'll do is I'll leave you with a nice shot of this park, and I'll probably go over to the Lewis and Clark Center, which is just behind me, and take some video of the reconstruction of the Lewis and Clark winter quarters in St. Louis before they set off on their expedition, which was based on a drawing by either Lewis or Clark, I can't remember which one, but somebody drew like an outline of what that fort looked like, and they've reproduced it just over the hill here. So anyway, so D-Day with the Screaming Eagles, George Koskimaki. Again, I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. It's a wonderful look at the heroes that fought in the Second World War to free the world from fascism, and I do recommend it within the context of after having read a more general history of the D-Day invasion. If you don't appreciate soldiers after you read something like this, then you must not be human. So anyway, so thanks for joining me today here in lovely Illinois, and I will see you next time. Again, so this is the replica of the Lewis and Clark fort, which they set up, I think, in 1803, 1804, before they started their expedition. It's a really cool museum. Unfortunately, they built it to spec, in other words, using the exact same material that was probably used by Lewis and Clark, and that meant that after a couple of years, that since it was not structure that was designed to stay intact originally, and it started to fall down, and so they've had to close it to the public, unfortunately. They are trying to raise funds to fix it and to use non-original material this time, so that it gives still the impression while remaining a safe environment. So you can see where part of the stockade has collapsed, and then also that center building there, which would have been where Lewis and Clark would have stayed if this had been the real thing. I'll take a few close-up shots of it so you can see what it looks like. But if you want to donate, we'll try to find on the website the address where you can donate to help support this museum, and so that they can rebuild this, really what is a wonderful display.